Schizophrenics of Reddit. What is the scariest hallucination, visually or audibly, that you have ever experienced? I have been treated for schizoaffective disorder for most of my life, with a presented family history. I take an antipsychotic and a mood stabilizer multiple times daily, hoping that qualifies me for this thread. I live in a sleepy town and in a particularly close subsection of the town where everyone knows everyone. I woke up one morning and felt quite fine. Drank my morning coffee and walked to the door to let my cat out. As I closed the door, I saw a rather large man with no shirt on run full speed into my neighbor's backyard, and he disappeared behind my neighbor's house. Obviously this set off a panic in me. Why was he running? What's he doing in Brad's backyard at 7 AM half naked? The problem with delusions and hallucinations is that during one you are so sure they are real. There's no doubt in your mind. And thus, no matter how outlandish the idea of some random person trespassing with no shirt on seems to you and I now, at the time I was heck bent and determined to find out who this guy was. The police arrested me in Brad's backyard screaming and ranting in boxers and a bathrobe that a man that doesn't exist was there doing exactly what I was now doing. I know you were probably hoping for horror stories or tales of imagining ghosts or dragons, but real horror is seeing your entire town watch you get carried away as a loony all when you thought you were helping the community. My greatest fear is not some uninspired monster, but rather that one day I won't know what's real anymore. No diagnosis here, but I've been suffering from constant delusions, paranoia and hallucinations for the past 2 years. The scariest hallucination I've ever had took place in a Target. I was in the canned food aisle when I saw a little girl grab a can. There was nothing particularly unusual about it. I, at first, figured it was just a girl getting something off the shelf for her mom. But then, after a while of standing with the can in her hands in silence, she turned around and stared at me with her empty eye sockets. She opened the can and started chasing me around the store with the can top. They're really sharp, and I started running through the store to escape. I know it's stupid, but it felt really real. Anyway, I ended up tripping, and the next thing I knew, she handed me the can top and was controlling my arms. I felt myself cut my neck and wrists open and was basically screaming. But then, I knocked myself out of it. When I came to, I was just standing staring at the cans with tears streaming down my face. It's the most vivid hallucination I've ever had, and much scarier than the ones I have every day. Jesus Christ, mate. Please see a doctor. Obligatory, not schizophrenic, but I've had hallucinations from bipolar. You mentioned visual and auditory hallucinations, but tactile hallucinations are terrifying. Bugs crawling on your skin all night, being tapped on the shoulder, someone breathing on the back of your neck. Crap's awful. The scariest auditory hallucination I've had was someone breathing under my bed. Luckily I had insight. Basically, I could hear it, but I knew it was a hallucination, so I didn't, start to try to hit the person under my bed. But, God, I was sitting paralyzed in my bed all night. I'm schizoaffective. I attempted suicide 2 years ago, while I was in recovery, not in a psych ward but actually still being hospitalized. I was having a hard time staying awake for any period of time. I woke up at one point and realized there was a freakishly tall person in a black suit standing next to my bed, leaning over me. I got this horrific sense of dread, like I was about to die, and I knew he had come for me. I looked up at his face and it had no features, like Slenderman. I closed my eyes and screamed as loud as I could, calling in the nurses who had to fight to get me to calm down. Part of me still wonders if it was a reaper that had come to take my soul. My GF worked with some extreme cases for a while. One woman, whose schizophrenia was brought on by trauma, frequently saw and smelled human beings being burnt alive, usually babies and children. That's because that's one of the things she saw in real life, which resulted in the schizophrenia. All of the ladies she worked with and were horribly institutionalized, but now lived in a nice assisted living facility, were well medicated and got to live independently as possible. But holy frick, that woman had some horrible things happen to her. Not officially diagnosed with schizophrenia or anything to do with hallucinations, but I do frequently have hallucinations. I should probably see somebody, but they aren't getting in the way of me doing anything so meh. When I talked to my counselor so many years ago, She said that as long as they aren't asking me to do anything, they aren't a big deal. So I feel like there's a dividing line between people with hallucinations and people with hallucinations that actually interact with them. Most of the hallucinations I have involve spiders crawling on my walls. Sometimes I'll look over and there'll just be a giant spider or thousands of tiny spiders crawling along my wall. Sometimes there'll be one regular sized spider in the corner with a maze of webs surrounding it. It typically happens at night while I'm in bed or shortly after I wake up, which leads me to believe it's related to some sleeping thing. Another frequent one I get is a specific series of knocks on my bedroom door. At first, the hallucinations freaked me right the frick out. Giant spiders on my wall, frick that. But over time, I've started to be able to recognize the difference between reality and my hallucinations. The problem is that while I can logically tell the difference and understand that what I'm seeing isn't real, I can still see it. My brain still says, yo, there's a thingy here. You gotta deal with it. And that's what's scary to me. These hallucinations are so real that they overwhelm any logical reason that I know I have. They make me do things that I wouldn't otherwise be doing. If I heard somebody knock on my door right now, I would go open it. Even if I know there's nobody on the other side of the door, I would still get up and open it. And that's terrifying to me. Why would I open my door for somebody if I know that somebody doesn't exist? Why would I get up and grab the bug spray if I know the bugs don't exist? It makes me feel like I don't have control of my own life, of my own self, and that's infinitely more scary than any hallucination I've ever had. Please go see a doctor, just to follow along with you, especially if you get worse. I'm not schizophrenic, but my partner has schizoaffective disorder and doesn't mind me posting here. The creepiest thing he has told me about would be the shadow people that he used to see. He doesn't see them anymore, but when he was a child he would see them floating over the top of people like his mom and stepdad, or they would pop their heads round the corner. He says they were like floating people but made out of darkness or like black smoke. He said most of the time they ignored him, but once his mom was in the kitchen making food and when he went in, one was over the top of her and then turned its head to look at him. It's so creepy and makes me sad thinking about my boyfriend having to feel so scared all the time as a small child. Not schizophrenic but am bipolar, and was investigated for schizophrenia while they were trying to diagnose me due to hallucinations. I initially heard what I thought was a broken radio both in my home and car for about 6 months. I had just moved house with my then boyfriend and therefore was quick to dismiss noises I didn't recognize. However, I began to be 100% convinced that a couple were living in the garage and wanted to hurt me. I refused to ever go into the garage. The one time I did, with my he noted a door was open, and I sprinted away with the torch, and was midway texting his mum that he was probably dead when he came back in, reasonably pee. A few months later I had the scariest night of my life. I had just broken up with above for various reasons, but somewhat including absolute paranoia and panic. Having just told him it was over, I went to the bathroom to cry. I looked down and my entire body was covered in spiders. I freaked. Couldn't turn to him for help obviously, so went back to the spare room. An hour after that I heard 2 voices, about 20 centimeters behind me over my right shoulder, in unison growl, "It's coming." Startled, I look up to see a black tall figure in the corner of the room. Imagine the same shape as a really tall Queen's Guard and very evil. At this point I ran out of the room back to my who understandably kicked me back out. He had since apologized and didn't know what was going on, just I was acting crazy. I left the next day for 2 months, moved back when my soul left and have been happy without many incidences since. I often describe bipolar as having small tasters of other mental disabilities, but the luck of only having them temporarily. My pet psychiatrists all initially thought I had schizophrenia when I was first admitted, and if what I experienced was half as bad as the actual disease, I am eternally grateful I'm not. My GF is bipolar. She was hospitalized after suffering a psychotic break and her delusions were terrifying and heartbreaking. Wouldn't wish that on anybody. She's also had some pretty interesting ones. She's had a delusion in which she saw 2 tigers who wore helmets that allowed them to speak. She said they were awesome. Paranoid schizophrenia here. My scary visions are usually in the early morning, but one time at around 2 PM I was standing in front of my vanity mirror applying makeup for the day. I started to hear the running of feet. Figuring it was my roommate at the time, I thought nothing of it. It wasn't. All of a sudden a figure busts in my room. It was about 4 feet tall, no arms, just legs, and was covered head to toe in dark blood-stained skin. Where its eyes were originally placed was just more skin folds. It ran around my room making barely audible grunts. If I had to think of a video game enemy that it looked like, I would say the cowman from the forest. That was my first visual hallucination, and afterwards I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my husband came home from work. That almost sounds like the rocket demon from Doom. That also sounds terrifying. Holy crap. My grandma had schizophrenia her whole life, but never said peep about it until she was in her deathbed. Apparently, from time she was 3 years old to 80 she had animals with human faces scream profanities at her. She also had a little man who lived in her purse and stole her money. I am in charge of a program at a mental health agency that serves people with chronic mental health disorders such as schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, borderline personality disorder, and many more mental health diagnoses. We run group homes in which these individuals can live and work on skills to be as productive in their community and lives as they are able. The clients we serve are the most chronic in terms of their diagnosis and have severe and persistent symptoms. I have worked with clients that consistently see images in doorknobs and mirrors in which they are slitting their own throat, have paranoid hallucinations in which they believe a hospital planted a brain controlling and listening device in their brain because he knew that this doctor murdered the client's own cousin, and many more horrifying symptoms. On a lighter note, a gentleman we provide services to consistently hallucinates that he runs a strip club and he interacts with the hallucinatory strippers by yelling at them to get back on the pole, BTCH, and other colorful demands. My great-grandmother died because of her hallucinations. I was not alive then, but she apparently was not given the appropriate care and ended up living on her own. She locked herself in her house and was found dead weeks later. She apparently had thought people were out to kill her, so she armed herself and was so scared she didn't move. I'm assuming until she died. She was found with her legs basically pickled from the amount of times she wet and crap herself, and had downed quite a few bottles of whiskey. When her house was cleaned and sorted through, they also found dozens of stolen purses, with literally nothing taken from them. To me that is the most terrifying way to die. So convinced that people are coming to kill you that you starve yourself to death while pickling yourself to death. My cousin who is my age also has it. She frequently believes that she is more than human, and has to go back to the hospital frequently from psychotic episodes. From what I glean she hears spirits, and occasionally sees them. She also has so many suicide attempts it breaks my heart. It's hard to get close to her because, again, she sometimes thinks she is beyond human. When she is in that state, although not scared in any sort, she alienates herself to the point of suicidal tendencies. I'm glad modern days we have more of a solution for her. I don't want her to end up like our great-grandmother. I fear occasionally that I may have symptoms of it, but not to that extent. It's mostly during manic swings of my bipolar that I hear things and see things. I've never directly seen anything other than motion from the corners of my eyes, and I just hear inaudible whispers, but when it happens it comes with a massive overwhelming fear of impending doom, which is the scary part. Hearing whispers is okay. Hearing whispers and being confident that you are about to die, that adds a layer of terror to the whispers. To be honest, what I should do is stop smoking weed and eating mushrooms and playing psychedelics, knowing full well that this demon is in my possible genetics. TLDR, my great-grandmother died due to an unmonitored episode. My cousin has attempted suicide due to it. The terror is less of what you see, and more of an uncontrolled fear that you are going to die. So I guess the scariest hallucinations is the invisible, impending doom. You most definitely should stop. I'm schizophrenic, and to be perfectly honest, I don't want to think about it, but I will mention that for a long time many of my hallucinations involved extreme gore. Also, my scariest probably occurred at a time where I was heavily symptomatic, so it'd be hard to remember. Thankfully, I wish I could give a better answer. Just for future reference to any people dealing with people that suffer from hallucinations, there are a few things you can do when you're around them to help them out in general. Do not call for them from another room. Make eye contact when you're chatting with them. Remember that hallucinations involve any of the senses. Some people are more prone to auditory hallucinations than visual hallucinations. So just act sensibly and try not to provoke them. I'd like to go into more detail about this. Often people suffering from schizophrenia have to develop their senses for analyzing themselves and figuring out what is real versus what is hallucinatory. Other things they do is look at other people's reactions to confirm their senses, or they take longer to answer questions by asking you to repeat or waiting for you to prompt them for an answer. Some qualities of hallucinations differ and are not present in other sensory modalities. Auditory hallucinations can appear louder, softer, more or less clear than the environment they are occurring in. Maybe they have other effects like echoing or distortion. Things that would not be present in their environment. Visual hallucinations are often said to be easier to distinguish but difficult to dismiss. Often they can be unsettling, persecutory, and make someone feel at risk, but not always. Alcoholics have certain visual hallucinations associated with them which are called Lilliputian hallucinations, in which they see little people. Also check out Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Olfactory and tactile hallucinations are less common but do occur and can be really unsettling. I feel like most patients encounter these ones at night. Usually really uncomfortable smells like gas leaks or burning smells, and it can be really annoying and time costly as you wonder if the odor is real and pray your house is not burning down. Tactile hallucinations can occur nightly and make it really difficult to fall asleep. It's really hard to ignore being touched. This hallucination can often accompany delusions. I only have psychosis, so not full schizophrenia, but I still have hallucinations and delusions. I'm a woman, and to be honest, both of my worst ones are pretty unbelievable because they sound so unusual compared to what you usually hear about in the media, etc. My worst hallucinations have actually been tactile, touch-based, so not quite what you're looking for, but there's a visual one also at the end which was very scary at the time. Tactile. I get this a few times a year, but 2016 was the worst. They began in 2014, where something invisible would climb into bed with me and spoon me. It progressed from there and it got a lot more handsy, but a round of antipsychotics got rid on them. In 2016 it came back majorly. I don't want to say it had fricked me because it's a hallucination. It's not real and there was definitely nothing visual, but something did happen. It only happened once, but for the next few days it would begin to touch me outside of my bedroom and during the day. One time it pinned me against the sink while I was washing dishes. Kinda felt like a power play, almost like it's saying, look what I can do. I can get you anywhere I want. Scary crap. Another round of antipsychotics got rid of it. I'm dreading the next flare up. Visual. One night walking home from class at university, I was hit by a sudden dizzy spell that made my vision distort a bit. Then it felt like I was being pulled to look to the other side of the road where the woods was. There stood Slenderman. Needless to say, I instantly ran back to the house without looking back and didn't sleep that night. This one was probably the first thing that made me realize something wasn't quite right. The tactile stuff started when I returned home at the end of the school year. The Slenderman stabbing case happened shortly after this hallucination actually. I think it might have even been the same year, strangely enough. I definitely get the tactile stuff you mentioned. Oftentimes when I am in my bed, and sometimes coupled with sleep paralysis. My girlfriend recently broke up with me and I actually thought it was her the last time it happened. The snuggling bit. I live alone now, so it fricked me up pretty good. Also have people tap my shoulder and whisper my name and ask me if I'm okay. Obligatory not me, but my aunt has paranoid schizophrenia. I don't know the scariest one, but the one that affected the rest of the family. After my grandpa died, her and my mom's father, she moved across the country to be with us and the rest of her siblings. One day she was supposed to come over and never showed, so my mom called her. She said there was a tiger stalking her outside her house, and she couldn't leave because it would eat her. My mom tried to reason with her because it would be all over the news if a tiger had gotten out from the zoo and there would be police everywhere. That turned into a massive fight between them, and my aunt packed up and moved back across the country without telling anyone. Not me, but my ex-boyfriend. He was diagnosed at a very young age, but never medicated. Doctors claimed it wasn't severe enough to medicate and he would probably grow out of it. He said his first hallucinations were auditory, just people calling his name. He'd be in a crowd and hear a voice very close say his name and would turn around and there was no one there. He was always reluctant to discuss his visual hallucinations. I think the whole topic made him insecure. But once when he was a child he saw dead people digging themselves out of the ground. He said he wasn't scared by it because he was old enough to know they were hallucinations. Once I asked him what his most vivid hallucinations were. He said he was driving and began to see hundreds of white rabbits run out into the road. When cars hit them, the rabbits would turn into smoke. He said it was a very long hallucination that lasted for quite a few miles. He never fully grew out of it. Once or twice he would mention the twinkles when we were together. He would see tiny twinkling lights everywhere. Sounded kinda nice. I truly hope the fairy lights remain his only hallucination, if not his most common one. I have a reoccurring memory of killing someone with my car and hiding the body in my garage. This never happened and I have never had a garage. This was one of the first hallucinations that pushed me get help. Even after years of therapy and medication, I still occasionally feel the pressure and anxiety associated with the event, which never happened. Trust me when I say, I have researched and confirmed over and over that this didn't happen, even though it feels as real as eating breakfast this morning. Hey everyone, Schizophrenic here. I'd rather not specify a specific type. I'm diagnosed with the paranoid kind, but I do show symptoms of a few other types from what I can tell. Either way, my scariest hallucinations are the ones that make me feel like the fabric of spacetime is ripping. I have a few that fall into that category. The most common one, which scares the crap out of me, is when I can see individual cells disappearing from existence, popping like balloons, not being replaced by new ones. I feel as though reality itself is dissolving and becoming a liquid substance, of sorts. It's as if everything is kinda magnified. I see much clearer when this is happening, which is unusual since my medication tends to blur my vision. Another less common one is feeling like everything in the universe is being drawn towards me involuntarily, being absorbed by my body and being unable to ever leave. I basically feel like I'm non-figuratively a black hole, which is terrifying and sad and oddly serene at the same time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to educate. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.